Chapter 15, The Way It All Changed. We set up our tents in a semicircle, backing onto the woods, midway between their fire and the cliff. Mig didn't want to stay close, nor did he want to be backed up onto an impossible exit. We built our own fire and unfurled blankets. Light rain fell for about an hour as the sun was setting up, so we roped our tarps and sat together for a moment to regroup and plan watch. We'll do hour shifts and leave at first light, starting with Tree and ending with French, got it? No one was sure later who was to blame that we were caught unaware, but then, the idea of blaming someone was too horrible to imagine. It would have killed us even more, and we were already so diminished. I heard her at the same time I felt a body crash into the side of the tent, full weight hard on my back while I lay, still clothed in my sleeping bag. The body gave a sound like a kitten squeezed too tight, a kind of windless yelp. The second pushed adrenaline into my thighs and knocked sleep out of my head. I struggled under the weight, and whoever it was rolled off, cursing. I heard another yelp, and then a screech, a long wail that made my teeth chatter. It was Wab. What the hell? I pushed to my knees and unzipped the tent flap. I turned once to see Slopper, eyes wide, blankets tucked around his face like a giant baby. I saw in his eyes the reflection of the Morse code my heart was pushing out. Terror. About 20 feet off, Tree and Zigwan were back to back, arms intertwined, at the end of a gun held by Travis. Migwan's was a few steps to their right, his own gun on the ground by his feet, chest heaving. I couldn't see Minerva or Rose, but Chiboy lay on the ground, his own knife pushed through his arm. Wab was still screaming, standing in front of her tent in a long underwear, mouth opened in a round O of panic. At first, I thought she must be screaming over Chiboy's wound, but then I followed her stare. Lincoln, having picked himself up from where he'd fallen onto my tent, had lumbered over behind Travis. His hair was messy on top, and his face looked dozy, like a sleeping child. He was swaying a bit. I thought maybe drink, or whatever he'd been swallowing back at the campfire that was making him move that way. But then he turned, and I saw Riri, her throat grasped under his thick arms, kicking legs in the air. She was grabbing at his forearm with her little hands, her face bright red. Just put her down. Mig tried to keep his voice steady. Please, just put the girl on the ground so she can breathe. Travis licked his lips, shifting his weight between the balls on his feet. He tried keeping his eyes pinned on the twins, Meg and Wab, while he backed up. Link, he called to his partner over the shoulder. Link, the girl is no good dead. For Christ's sakes, man, make sure she's breathing. Put her down, Meg yelled now, pointing an edge of panic in his voice. Easy, Chief, easy. Travis trained his handgun on Mig and moved forward quickly to kick off the hunting rifle away from reach and just into the shadows of the edge of the woods. Then he turned. Lincoln, for fuck's sakes, put her down. The bigger man obliged, bending his arms so that Riri dropped suddenly to the ground. She would have fallen flat on her face if her arms weren't being held at a cruel angle. Instead, she kind of hung there. At least her feet were on the ground, and she was coughing now. I hadn't been seen yet, still half in the farthest tent with Lincoln's unobserved current state. I slowly pulled back through the flap, turning to show Slopper a finger pressed to the lips. He hadn't moved. I reached beside my bag and retrieved the rifle, all the saliva dried up in my mouth. Link, we've got the Crooters coming any minute now. Every head is worth a fortune. Don't damage any of them. They were traitors, Indians turning in Indians for reward. I couldn't believe it. I'd been lulled to complacency by the color of skin and an accent that made home feel real. She's hurt. Let her go. It was Rose. She'd emerged from her tent and was holding Minerva back at the door. Minerva, who had seen Riri dangling from the man's meaty grasp while her arm twisted at a sick angle, was frantic to claw past into the clearing. The sight of the old woman in her kerchief and long skirt over track pants made Lincoln laugh. He dropped Riri to clutch his belly, and that's when Travis turned his head and Chiboy made his move. He jumped up from his crouch on the ground, knife out of his arm and in the back of his hands. He lunged at Travis, driving the blade into the man's leg just above the knee. The older man screamed and dropped the gun in pain and shock. Mig jumped at it, smashing a fist into the howling man's chin on the way back up. Lincoln, watching the group start to rally, picked Riri up and threw her over his wide shoulder. I didn't see a weapon on him, but just the sheer size of him matched with his unnatural state made him a danger to us all, especially for Riri. He turned and started to run. Stop, Mig yelled. I'll shoot. But he wouldn't. The clearing was dark and Riri was at risk. Instead, Mig gave chase, Wab at his heels, quickly catching up and passing him. Her old runner's instincts returned. Rose followed. Behind her, Minerva jogged, her arms pumping at her side, not going much faster than a walk. her lips pushed out like a niche GPS system. While half the group took off after Riri and the Hulk, the twins had gathered up Chiboy, pulling him away from Travis, who was crumpled on the ground with a bloody mouth. Tree ran to my tent where I sat, half in, half out. You okay, French? He peered in behind me at Slopper. Slopper? He gave the boy a thumbs up sign. Slopper just stared in return. We gotta tie this guy up. Quick, Tree. Ziguan came up behind his brother. I watched them tie Travis's hands to his ankles with a piece of rope before slinging my rifle on my back. Then I ran off into the dark after my family. I ran hard, with abandon, into the narrow swatch of clearing, darker here with the closer trees. I ran full out, almost tripping over the huddled shape of Minerva where she sat, crouched on the ground, rocking back and forth and muttering words I couldn't pick up. I managed to avoid her, but slammed my shoulder hard into the protruding birch branch. I heard a dry snap, and I wasn't sure if it had come from the branch or the explosion of heat in my arm from further up the path. It didn't matter, I just kept going. Up ahead I could see shadows, and then figures, as the trees opened and the moon poured into the clearing before the cliff. I slowed down to assess, like Mig had taught me to do. One of the figures was on the ground, another was bent over, hands on the knees. A third was holding onto a tree, leaning over the edge. And that was it. There were only 3. I doubled my speed and burst into the moonlight. Wob was on the ground. She looked like she was sleeping, but her eyes were wide open. Rose was bent over, throwing up between her feet, hysterical in between retches. It was Mig who leaped over the edge. I grabbed him first, taking his forearm into my grip. It's a good thing, too, because his hand let go seconds later, too shaky to hold on. I pulled him back hard, and he fell on top of my legs on the grass. Where'd they go? Did we lose them? I refused to put the pieces together. Mig, move, get up. I struggled under his dead weight. Mig, come on. We're giving him too much of a head start. I'll go into the bush on the west. You take the east side. He wasn't moving. I got angry, pushing at him, kicking him in the back to dislodge my other foot from under him. Still, he was motionless. Come on, you guys. I was yelling now, pacing a small half circle around the Catonic group. Let's go. Do I need to do this alone? I waited 2 seconds for an answer. Fine, I'm going. I walked between Mig and the cliff, on my way into the trees where I'd mimicked Chiboy's stealth earlier on, like that meant anything. And then I saw it. A single pink boot, all shiny like candy, one of the fastest boots in the world, real Nishan, and it was empty, on its side, at the edge of the cliff. There is a feeling that has no name, because really, it is such an absence that it exists only in a vacuum of feeling, and so really can have no name. It sucks you inside out and places you in a space where touch and taste and sound and sight all turn to ash. I was there now, alone. There was no mooring, no ground, no sky. There was just me and the boot, and then, suddenly, the warm weight of the rifle on my back. My vision narrowed, and I turned on a heel, throwing myself back the way I came. From 1,000 miles away I heard Migwan's call, French, come back! But it just could have been the wind. I passed Minerva and the broken birch and bounded over the ground, legs aching, the gun bouncing softly against my spine. Later, I couldn't recall this journey back to the camp. There was no planning, no ideas or theories, or even any real rage locked inside my skull. There was just nothing. Nothing but a pink boot without a girl to wear it, and a rifle that I knew as well as my own hand. I crashed into the campsite, startling the twins who had finished tying up Travis and were guarding him with a handgun. Slopper sat at the edge of the tent, the blanket still pulled tight around his cheeks. French, Jesus, you scared us. Tree trained the gun back at our prisoner from where he had pointed it at me and wiped his forehead with the back of a dirty hand, leaving a streak like paint. Where's the others? Did you get Riri? Ziguan moved closer to his brother, and I must have had it written all over my face, because he grabbed the baseball cap off Tree's head and pushed it over his own, eyes still on me. Frigging Link. He killed her, didn't he? Damn it, I told him to lay off those pills. Travis spat blood into the grass and sighed. He struggled to his knees, hands pulled tight behind him, and looked up. Listen, boy, there's no use in us fighting now. I reached behind me and yanked on the strap, bringing the rifle to my side. I cocked the barrel and trained it on the prostrate man in front of me. Panic flashed across his face, and then it settled into a look of soft, practiced pleading. That's the only time I felt anger through it all, seeing that rehearsed mask slip over his dark face. Hey, come now, let me go and I can show the rest of you the way out of here, before the white boys show up. Blood and spit flew with his words, betraying his anxiety under the mask. French, it's okay, we got him under control. Tree was trying to reason with me, or maybe it was just the wind. I kept my eyes on Travis. He nodded at Tree's wisdom and then tried a weak smile at me. Yeah, come on, brother. Time is slow in that vacuum space. In this new space, I had time to aim squarely between the man's eyes, watching his muscles contort and his skin wrinkle. Then I just decided against it, lowering the barrel to his chest. Always go for the sure target. Meg had taught us that on one of my first hunts, and I listened to my elders. I dug a shoe in to accommodate for the kickback and bent at the knee, just like Meg had showed me. Come on now, don't be stupid, kid. We can get out of here. Let's go. Come on, kid, I didn't mean it. It's nothing personal. I heard him whine a little at the end of his plea, but then maybe it was just the wind. I pulled the trigger and the wind stopped blowing.